Hello, it's Phil Forway. Today I quickly want to talk about Awenydd, the Gwyar tape. Originally released via Satatuata, and we traded some tapes at the Crew Transmissions Festival in Leiden earlier this year, and I obtained the Gwyar tape from him, a home-dubbed copy, and we had a chat, and it was a very, very pleasant meeting we had. And today I just wanted to tackle a couple of thoughts I had while listening to the thing. Give me a sec. So the tape basically has one main mood. I'm not really familiar if there's different tracks on the tape or not. I found that both sides of the tape have a very coherent and cohesive vision, in that it starts out very loop heavy, loop driven, unknowable in sounds, very eerie and almost cosmic. It gave me CCCC vibes at a couple of points. There's some voice manipulation on loop, I suppose, that was going on, that felt very cerebral but detached at the same time. There is a certain version of power electronics being presented, especially in the first third of the first side of the tape. The piece starts to branch a little into more, how can I put it, like an urban feel. It becomes a little closer in vibe. Some more feedbacks creep in that are being modulated and manipulated in performance, and seem to be less part of a loop or similar, which basically gave that cosmic, that unknowable start of the tape some kind of direction, which I appreciated a lot. The last third of the tape of side A went into a more almost emotional direction, in that it played on a what seems like synthesized bass rumble that has some harmonic tonality to it, some melodic tonality. And what I appreciated was that it wasn't, played like, okay, here's like the big finale of the first side synth part, like what Prurient basically does to just bring it home at some point, which is a trick you can do. But what I enjoyed a lot with Gwyar and the end of the first side of the tape is that it's very unexcited, very effortless, how that bass, that sea of emotion basically kicks in, and how the vocals or the voices that seem to be performed by loop in the beginning took a more performed direction and infused a certain degree of of emotion and vulnerability without being obnoxious and going full on ambient or even poppy. And yeah, he basically, Awenydd brought it home, like on that first side, perfectly already, very effortlessly, and in style. It never goes into painful territory, but always stays uncomfortable enough. Yeah, and it's very, very strong side of the tape. Side B of Gwyar. Yeah, when it basically sonically stays in a similar ballpark there, but the feeling of the piece becomes way more technological, I would say, in that the textures become way more rhythmic and bleak. Generally, the sound becomes way more bleak on the second side of the tape. I would even go so far to say, okay, it's becoming negative. Like the vibe become like the whole basically tape is dark in sonic vibe and nature, but on the second side, the sound becomes more negative in vibe. The first side was still a little more cosmic, a little more ambiguous, and the second one is definitely way darker tinged. Not necessarily heavier, but goes like the sounds are way more direct. The voices you hear are way more direct, closer. I thought I even heard, certain words. They were non-discernible on the first side of the tape, but I thought I heard words like unclean and something the likes. So something very personal to a certain degree. The second half is basically a little like split in two parts. Almost becomes digital in comparison to the first half, which sounded a little more analog, in that the sounds that Awenydd plays still had this kind of, I would say, warm edge to them. And the second part, the digital part, became more foreignly charged on the emotional side. Like the voices break up a little more, like they were time stretched basically. Everything starts to sound just differently detached, which seems to be, I don't know really, but seems to be a certain theme on that tape. There is never a really, except of the end of the first side, there never is really like a direct doc that made me connect to the sound on an emotional level, and that's not meant in a negative way from my end. It just thought, it is maybe a theme on there, a certain isolation in itself, like the personal self is isolated, is numb. Everything that happens from the outside being like the spiritual part, a cosmic part maybe, and the what is happening in my direct social surroundings, but also the technological part, the utilities I use, uh, and electronics I use every day, up to the digital part, like digital stuff we all use, um, and the personal detachment to all these things. That's the image I got from listening to the thing. And with this little glimmer of not hope but catharsis, emotion at the end of side A, let's call it the middle, the centerpiece of the tape. The second half of the B side, still, which is still attached to that more, let's call it digital part of Gwyar, becomes more harsher in sound, in tones and textures being used. Basically, what I would call the only harsh tools used on the tape. I wouldn't call it a harsh tape at all. I would. It's definitely a noise tape, which is look into power electronics in certain parts and drone at other moments. Would never really call it harsh noise. The end of side B is basically where the textures become more pummeling and give more of a harsh image, including there's high feedback shrieks as well going on, but never, those are never really what feels like designed to harm the listener. They're not designed for effect. They're more akin to yells, screaming, like just sprinkling some human emotion into the latter half of the side B. It's definitely not fun times, not at all. But at the same time, it did not scare me away in that regard. That what I just described, that it sounds so personal, but at the same time so detached. It gives this really gray, drab feeling. It oozes of almost sadness, but not in an emotional way, more like in a very integrated, like core sadness. Like the core mood of that tape is drabness and sadness without going all balls to the wall playing sad tunes. That's not what it does at all. The first side, I gotta say, it's been a blast. It was so tastefully and musically arranged, almost. Every element had their place and moment when to come in, to shine, and to leave again. It was always very selected in the way that each sound came in, played out, and went again. It was never an overabundance of sound happening the whole time. Side B was good as well. It just it was meandering a little more than the first side. It just didn't feel as intentional and hyper focused like the first side did, which is not a bad thing. That's usually how B-sides are on tapes and LPs. You got a little more of a loose vibe on the second sides, which makes sense because your hearing and taste buds are already accustomed to the world that the tape is painting and the artist is painting. Yeah, just like the first sight more, and I would even go that way to say, man, this is something. If someone would ask me, hey, do you maybe have some recommendations in noise? I wanna get into the whole thing, and I like ambient music. I maybe like doom music, drone. I think the Gwyar tape would be, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way because it's still complex as fuck. But I would say it holds a lot of accessible value to the broader scheme of noise and abstract sound and experimental sound and repetitive sound. So yeah, um, I'm very I take the tape. Thank you, Awenydd, for trading it with me. Um, I'm having a lot of pleasure out of it, and yes, I will listen to it again. Bye.